This game week, my decisions will be built around chip strategy. With Haaland dominating and Semenyo doing pretty well himself, there's so much to think about as we look at my team for FPL Game Week 5. Okay, well, let's start here. We'll start with the negatives, and the negatives was my Game Week 4 scores, and I know it was a very, very big red arrow indeed, and, you know, a lot of my players just completely failed to do really anything, but it is just crazy that this is pretty much the exact same team that had a huge score in Game Week 3, now disappointing in Game Week 4. So I guess over a small sample size, it is very difficult to tell who are the good players, who are the bad players, but yeah, a really big disappointment for me in Game Week 4 with a couple of clean sheets, but really not very much there. Salah with a lucky penalty at the end of the game to give me some captain points, and Joao Pedro really the only other return in this team. It seemed like one of those weeks where if you didn't have Haaland, Semenyo or Van de Ven, you probably had a pretty weak score, and actually most of you guys probably have at least one of those players. I did not, and therefore my score did indeed suffer. But can we move on into Game Week 5 with some positives? Well, I think we can, actually, and I'm not too worried about Game Week 5, particularly now I'm formulating a bit of a chip strategy. By the way, guys, if you do enjoy this video, do drop a like. It really does help out the channel a whole bunch, and make sure you subscribe if you want to follow along with my chip strategy and many other things throughout the rest of the season. So I do actually have 2 free transfers and 0.9 million in the bank, so there's definitely some flexibility I have for Game Week 5. Let's start off in goal, and I think I'm going to go for Sanchez this week. It could be one of Sanchez or Dubravka, but a lot of the decisions I'm going to be making in Game Week 5 are going to be based around basically the clean sheet odds and the goal scoring odds, because last week we saw an absolute shocker with 10 clean sheets in the Premier League in Game Week 4. That was really unexpected. That is not something that happens very often. In fact, it is far, far different to what we've seen typically over the past couple of seasons. That many clean sheets is a super, super rare thing. Now, that said, I wanted you guys to have a look at this with me, and this is from Rob T. And what we're seeing here is the average projected goals, the clean sheet odds. What we actually see here is the lowest projected goals or average projected goals in Game Week 5. It is lower than we've seen in years. So this is going to be one of the lowest scoring game weeks according to the goal scoring odds. Now, of course, maybe that favors clean sheets, but even when you look at the clean sheet odds, there's nothing really crazy high here either. So it's a very, very strange game week. The bookmakers, the models, the predictions, they're all saying that this week is going to be a pretty disappointing game week generally. And I think a big part of that is to do with the fact that we see Arsenal and Man City face each other, the big teams facing each other there. Aston Villa have a nice fixture against Sunderland, but they have been very much out of form. Nottingham Forest, you could argue a similar situation with their game against Burnley. So lots of these games, Crystal Palace, West Ham, we're expecting a lot of low score lines. Even the likes of, you know, Newcastle versus Bournemouth, this has actually got the lowest projected goals in an individual game of this entire game week. So really, really low projections there. Not too much expected from those teams. So all in all, guys, it's going to be a pretty disappointing game week, or at least that's what we think. So in that sense, I don't want to make any too rash decisions really in Game Week 5 individually. It seems like a pretty weak game week to really go out and target, and that is going to come into play with my chip strategy, what I do when I wildcard, when I free hit, when I bench boost, etc, etc. We do need to consider this game week and how it's going to set up. Now, I want to look at some of these clean sheet odds, guys, because what I think is really, really interesting is we see Tottenham Hotspur away against Brighton down at 20%. And given that Spurs have actually been conceding quite a lot of chances despite their clean sheets, and Brighton away from home, Brighton are a team that can be frustrating, that can score, you know, these odd goals just to ruin clean sheets. I wouldn't be surprised to see Spurs lose their clean sheet there. But we see Chelsea here. We've got Sanchez in goal, of course. It is between Sanchez and Dubravka for me. So we do see Burnley with 24% chance of a clean sheet, Chelsea with a 22% chance of a clean sheet. So you can see that there's not too much between them. But what I think is actually, if you do have someone like Estev in your team and Dubravka, then maybe you can hedge your bets a little bit here. Play one of the Burnley defenders and maybe play Sanchez as well. If you have Sells, you're probably going to play Sells instead of Dubravka as well. So if you have Raya, you probably play Raya instead of Dubravka. And if you want to cover that Burnley defense, you do still have Estev there, kind of in your back pocket if you need to. But actually, a lot of decent-ish clean sheet odds for some of my other defenders. We see Crystal Palace 30%, West Ham 26%, Forest 31%. So maybe these are the kind of defenses that I need to be targeting and playing this game week. And if we're projecting a low-scoring game week, well, maybe I don't need to be going for too many attacking players, particularly when we look at Everton here, 0.94 projected goals. Am I going to go for Dewsbury Hall in a game week like this? Probably not. We look at Pedro Porro, 20% chance of a clean sheet. He's lost his set pieces. He's not very attacking. Can I depend purely on clean sheets for Pedro Porro? Probably not this game week. So there's a few different players with some different concerns here. And I think it's going to take a few, like, you know, surprising results. Maybe Chelsea getting a good result against Manchester United, potentially there. That's going to be a big one there. If Aston Villa can regain their form against Sunderland, then maybe that gives you something. But aside from that, it may be that clean sheets are going to be your best access to points in what is projected to be such a low-scoring game. So sorry to go on and on about this, but I think this is really important context that we need to look at before selecting our teams. So let's go ahead and do just that. We've got Sanchez in goal already. We mentioned we're going to play him ahead of Dubravka with the idea that maybe we play Estev as a defender. But in our defense, we're going to start off with Murillo. The projections right now is pretty good. The prognosis is good. Murillo, very good chance to actually start, recover from his knock, and play in game week 4. So that is very positive there. Hopefully we'll get the final nod before deadline, and as such, we'll be able to safely play Murillo against Burnley, because that is a really nice clean sheet odds there in that particular game. And hopefully Murillo can get back to getting his defensive contributions we saw from him last season, because he really has disappointed so far this season. We've got Richards here as well, away against West Ham, another team with pretty decent clean sheet odds here. We actually saw Richards score in the midweek in the League Cup game. He does have that bit of attacking threat. I've been telling you guys about it. It seems that he scores in every competition but the Premier League, but how long is that going to last? I don't know. What is also interesting is that West Ham seem to have a bit of a weakness against set pieces so far this season. So actually players like Richards and Lacroix in particular, who are those set piece target men alongside maybe Mateta, from those set pieces, from those corners, from those indirect free kicks. These are going to be the players that have a really good chance of getting goals from these opportunities. So I'm pretty hopeful that maybe we can get a bit lucky, and in a low-scoring game week, it's going to be these kind of things: a Richards corner goal, a Murillo clean sheet and defensive contribution point, and maybe some bonus points. These are going to be the things that contribute to a decent score this week, in my opinion. We've got Juve here as well, Crystal Palace at home. I do think Palace are lacking firepower, so even though, you know, I think Crystal Palace are maybe going to have a chance of scoring from set pieces, you also have to consider that their open play threat right now is not particularly good, and they are lacking. They've got no Eze, they've not got no Saar. Mateta is kind of exhausted at the moment from playing so many minutes. So on the flip side of that, you know, would we be surprised to see West Ham keep a clean sheet? And the answer for me is no. I would not be surprised by that at all. I can definitely see a 0-0 in this game. But hey, both Richards and Juve have that little bit of attacking threat in their own ways that maybe can contribute to something. And both players actually have been doing well for defensive contributions so far this season. Maybe not always getting the points, but getting close, which is definitely a positive sign for us. Estev against Nottingham Forest, again, is this going to be a 0-0 game? I'm kind of hoping for that one, I suppose, with Estev at home against Nottingham Forest. But the defensive tactics worked pretty well against Liverpool for Burnley. And if they can keep doing things like that, keep the scoreline very low, then they're going to have a huge chance of staying up this season. So I'm wondering if that is going to happen again. And Estev, can he get some more defensive contributions? Hasn't been amazing for it so far this season. Maybe it was just the fact he played Liverpool last week, you know, having to do a lot of defending in that game, that he was able to keep, to rack up a lot of defensive contributions. So it's going to be about a strategy and how Burnley set up in this game. But there's always a chance here. And I actually fancy Estev and a lot of the defenders maybe above a lot of the attackers this week, to be fair. And that's why I'm going to be playing him this week in a 4 at the back formation. Going into midfield, this is where things get strange. We're going to go with a 3-man midfield this game week, guys. Mo Salah to start us off against Everton. Goal and an assist in the midweek Champions League game. So finally, maybe we're seeing some positive signs that Salah can get back to his best, but of course I know people are very worried about this player. But Everton at home is going to be a big fixture for Liverpool for Salah. We see the Liverpool-Everton games can be pretty high scoring, can be pretty intense. This is Everton's cup final and they will be going out to win this game. So as such, we could definitely kind of predict that maybe Liverpool are going to have a decent amount of opportunities, at least, for goals. Liverpool have the highest projected goals for this game week, 2.11 goals we're projecting. I know that's not crazy high, but it is significantly higher than pretty much any other team in the Premier League. And what we've seen from Salah so far in the Premier League, certainly, is that he doesn't need to play well to get FPL points. He will pop up and randomly get a goal or an assist, and of course, bonus points after that as well. And suddenly you're laughing. Penalties help, and they also help with Bruno Fernandes against Chelsea. And last game week, Chelsea did show some defensive fragilities against Brentford. And after that very, very intense midweek game in the Champions League for Chelsea, you do have to wonder whether a fully rested Manchester United team will be out for a bit of a bit of a resurgence. Well, let's be honest. Probably not. Let's be totally honest. Man United are not looking great recently, but I do actually think of all of the games in the Premier League, if we're looking for a game that maybe has goals on both sides, that maybe could be a little more open, I do kind of like the look of Manchester United at home against Chelsea to be a potential game a little bit like that. I can't really see any other games other than maybe obviously Liverpool against Everton, where I can kind of imagine the games being very open, very attacking. The rest of the games, I think they could be quite cagey, really. So actually, Mo Salah, Bruno, in terms of, you know, trying to pick some players that we think will do well this game week, they're not the worst shouts in the world. Might just be a case of trying to get lucky with penalties, though, to be honest, guys. Like I say, I'm not. My hopes are very low for this game week. Have I maybe portrayed that at all in this video? Maybe I have. We've got Rodgers as well against Sunderland, and this is possibly going to be his last chance for me, as well as Ollie Watkins up front. The Aston Villa duo have been so disappointing so far this season. However, they did score their first goal of the season in the midweek. So is that going to mean that maybe there's a little bit of confidence in here? Come on, guys. It's a game against newly promoted Sunderland. I know Sunderland have been, you know, not too bad so far this season, but you have to say that Aston Villa should be winning this game. And it's kind of like, what do we think of Aston Villa? Is it just that it's just a strange situation that Aston Villa aren't scoring goals and it just keeps happening over and over again? And, you know, sometimes if you flip a coin 4 times in a row now, then you're going to land on tails every time. Sometimes that will happen. Strange things will happen again and again and again. If there's, you know, if we're looking at so many different teams all around the world, one team's going to be doing terribly at any given point. But does that mean that they are a bad team? Does that mean that's going to carry on forever? Probably not. So it's a case of, is this just Aston Villa have just had a freak run of bad results, or are we going to see, you know, a return to normality? It's going to happen at some point. Could it be this week? It's a pretty good candidate this week against newly promoted Sunderland. This is a really good candidate for things to get back to normal. I don't believe that Aston Villa are suddenly an awful Premier League team. I don't believe that for a second. But it is a case of how long can you be patient for? If they can't score against Sunderland, then I just don't know what else to say. It's just, it's so poor, isn't it, from them? So fingers crossed, Watkins penalties, which is a useful thing to know, I suppose, that he is going to be on penalties now. Can they do it against Sunderland? And if they do, am I willing to keep them for Burnley in game week 7? That is a question that will be answered on Sunday when these two teams face each other. But they take a toll, you know, they take an emotional toll, these players, on yourselves when you're an FPL manager with Aston Villa players. It is painful indeed. We've got Joao Pedro here as well. Now, he has been doing great for me so far this season. No complaints, no notes. Manchester United gamers always going to spell opportunity for any player. So Joao Pedro, hopefully he continues to start, does well there, and you know, he's a player that I don't need to worry about too much. And we've got Arteta as well against West Ham. He has looked exhausted. He is surely going to get rotated, rested at some point in the near future. I really hope it doesn't happen this game week, but I wouldn't be totally surprised if he was rested against West Ham. It wouldn't come as too much of a surprise to me. Or if, he gets a 59th minute sub, 1-pointer. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be sat there, complaining about the bad luck. I can definitely see it coming. But penalty taker, again, can I get some luck that way? We've got to get some luck somewhere, right, guys? We're going to need it this game week for sure. Going onto the bench, Dubravka, we mentioned, not going to play him. Dewsbury Hall, with Everton having such low projected goals against Liverpool away from home, it just doesn't seem like a player worth playing. And even if Everton were to score a goal, it's probably more likely to be like a Grealish or an Njai or maybe even a Beto involved in that goal. That's not to say Dewsbury Hall won't be involved in goals. He definitely has a chance, but he's probably like maybe third or fourth in the pecking order of players most likely to get an attacking return in a game that is already super limited for potential attacking returns. So that's kind of my opinion on that one, and that's why I am benching Dewsbury Hall this week. Pedro Porro, we mentioned about the poor clean sheet odds, which is really the reason he's there. He's not offering enough in attack and in defensive contributions for me to really kind of justify playing him despite the poor clean sheet odds. And Ismaila Sarr remains injured on my bench for yet another game week. So what are we going to do? Are we going to make some transfers? No, we are not, because I have a strategy that will solve everything pretty much, guys. So, yeah, we'll put the captain's armband on Salah. We're going to put the vice captain on Joao Pedro. I think I'm going to stick this way. There is some temptation to captain Joao Pedro, but I think we're going to go with Mo Salah this game week. But these two players, really the only players I would consider. I prefer both to Erling Haaland this week, for example. Maybe that's just me. If I had a Cole Palmer, maybe I would go there. He seems to be back in form, and he's definitely a player I'd like to have in my FPL team very soon. But how are we going to do that? What is the strategy? Why am I not making any transfers? I've got 2 free transfers. I'm not spending them, even though it looks like, 4 at the back. That looks bad. It's all about Game Week 5 and the transition between Game Week 5 and Game Week 6. Let me show you what I mean. So to demonstrate this, guys, I am on the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool. If you want to check this out and all of the other amazing tools from Fantasy Football Hub, including Opta stats, predicted points, projections, transfer recommendations that are really specific to your team and playstyle, and many more great features, you can get your 50% off plus your money back deal by using the link in the description. If you like what you see or you like the sound of any of those other tools, go check it out. Link in the description. However, this what you see in front of you guys is a Game Week 6 wildcard team. Now, this team is what most of you guys will probably in your head, you will probably say, this is what a good team looks like. This is what a team that is really nice, really strong looks like. Maybe there are some tweaks you can make. I mean, I think Tosin is maybe a player that I could remove. Just to read it out, I've got Raya, Tosin, Romero, Senesi, Semenyo, Palmer, Xavi, Simmons, Paqueta, Haaland, Joao Pedro, Gyökeres, and Dubravka, Richards, Elliott, Alderete on the bench there. And of course, there are some other players you could go for. Elliott could maybe go for like a Caicedo maybe, or a Dewsbury Hall. Tosin can definitely be switched around to various other defenders. Maybe some people prefer Chalobah. You can definitely try and get Gabriel in there if you downgrade Xavi to, an Njai or someone like that. So there's definitely ways of kind of doing different things. This team actually has 0.6 million in the bank. I've tried to build a team with plenty of spare money in the bank, just in case we see price changes. Well, we will see price changes that may impact my ability to reach certain players. But yeah, this is just one of many drafts I've made. Of course, as we go into next week, if I do wildcard, I will tell you what draft I will end up using. But this is what I've kind of worked with as a kind of rough idea. And I think this has got most of the main players in that I will have. So Reyes, Senesi, Semenyo, Palmer, a Spurs attacker, probably Paqueta, Haaland, Joao Pedro, Gyökeres. That's going to be my front line. Dubravka, Richards, they're going to be on my bench. Alderete is probably going to be my 4 million defender as well. So most of this is kind of reasonably secure, but I am playing around with some other things. And looking at this team, which hopefully most of us will agree, this looks like a very strong team indeed. This team is pretty rubbish for Game Week 5. It really isn't great for Game Week 5. So yes, you maybe have, I don't know, Richards against West Ham, of course, is not bad, but it's like, Chelsea defender against Manchester United, Arsenal defense against Man City, got Spurs defense against Brighton, you got these Bournemouth players against Newcastle, you've got Paqueta against Crystal Palace, which is a tough defense to face, you got Haaland against Arsenal, you got Gyökeres against City. All of these players, even Senesi against Newcastle on the bench, so many of these players that look really nice from game week 6 onwards actually don't look great for game week 5. So I think delaying the wildcard 1 week could be worth it. You can see the Fantasy Football Hub rating on this team, by the way, guys, is 85%. So not very high. So if I was to wildcard in game week 6 to a team that is something like this, the rotations are pretty good. So going through game week 7, again, we're going to have a very strong team for this one. We can bench Tosin and Paqueta in their tough fixtures, as well as Alderete, who's playing away to Manchester United. Game week 8, this is where things get interesting. So again, if I was to wildcard in game week 6, have a strong team for game week 7. Game week 8, if I was to wildcard into a team, something like this, we have a really strong bench for this particular game week. Dubravka against Leeds, Alderete against Wolves, Senesi against Crystal Palace. Again, that's a good clean sheet opportunity there. And we have got Elliott against Spurs, or, whichever other kind of fifth midfielder I end up in this particular slot. There are some other options there. Elliott is probably the player I'm least convinced by. Of course, we will also have transfers to use between, game week 6 and game week 8. I will already have 2 free transfers going into game week 7. And then we'll obviously get a new one each week beyond that as well. So 3-4 transfers by game week 8. So we can still make some tweaks, last minute tweaks, if things don't look quite right. Hopefully we will get them right, though, by the time we lock in a game week 6 wildcard team. And yeah, the bench boost looks strong. The team looks strong. We've got double Arsenal already, which is going to be really useful from game week 8 onwards. I think Chelsea players look amazing from game week 9 onwards. They play Sunderland, Spurs, Wolves, and then Burnley all in a row. And then maybe game week 11, we think about moving some of those Chelsea players on. Maybe try and get Salah back in, maybe try and get Isak in. We also maybe see from game week maybe 10 actually, maybe thinking about removing some Spurs players, because I think their fixtures turn a little bit tougher from game week 10. So maybe think about removing one of them. So yeah, there is going to be adaptations as weeks go by, but it really targets the immediate fixtures very well and leaves us some options to move things around as we approach kind of the game week 13 fixture swings, which will have more emphasis on Man City and Liverpool players. But that's why having 2 free transfers before you even wildcard, carrying them beyond the wildcard, and then, we're going to have to use all of those free transfers up before the AFCON, because when the AFCON tournament starts, suddenly we're going to be given all of these free transfers. You only get given them if you only get given them up to 5 free transfers. So you have to use your 5 free transfers you already have in order to get all of the new ones given to you, if that makes sense. So yeah, in that sense, we can just go crazy. And instead of doing that kind of wild card game week 13 strategy, we can kind of bank some transfers and slowly adapt and maybe use up all of those transfers we have around game week 13. Take a hit if we need to, but I don't think we will need to do that, really. As well as setting ourselves up really nicely for the game week 6 to 12 period. So we'll have a wild card covering us with a really nice team from 6 to 12. And then again, we can make some adaptations using our free transfers. We've already got some saved in order to really, really capitalize on game week 13 onwards. But team is rubbish for game week 5. This wildcard doesn't work really to play this game week, unfortunately. It doesn't look any better than my current team, unfortunately. Game week 6, it looks a lot better than my current team, and we'll have Haaland in there. The one sad thing is that it looks like I'm not going to be able to triple captain in game week 6 on Haaland. I would definitely recommend that if you weren't using a chip on Haaland in game week 6. And yeah, there are going to be plenty of other opportunities. Like, there will always be more good fixtures for any given team. But game week 8 looks really nice for a bench boost. Dubravka, well, basically Burnley against Leeds and Sunderland against Wolves are 2 really nice fixtures. I've taken the goalkeeper and a 4 million defender who have the home games, which I think is pretty useful there. But yeah, I think with your bench boost, you're looking for those players who are cheap. And when do the cheap players have good fixtures? And game week 8 pretty much is the answer to that question. In my opinion. I also have a free hit team for Game Week 6. So as well as building that Game Week 6 wildcard team, I wanted to build a free hit team because I think that's my other option. I have a wildcard in Game Week 6 or a free hit in Game Week 6. And I wanted to kind of see what the free hit team might look like. And it's genuinely pretty similar. It really, really is. So I don't know if this will be the final free hit team a lot of people go for, but something like this for free hit in Game Week 6 to me looks really, really appealing. And it's not that different from my wildcard team. Really, what are the differences? Well, we won't go for Gavardio or Foden in a wildcard team because I'm sure we're worried about their minutes going forward. We probably don't have any Arsenal players in a Game Week 6 free hit team because Arsenal's good fixtures really don't start until Game Week 7. They'll be fine in Game Week 6 against Newcastle, don't get me wrong, but they're not like the perfect players to have. And in a free hit, you want those perfect players, right? You can have those perfect players. So it's really not too different between a Game Week 6 free hit and a Game Week 6 wildcard, which kind of just led me to think, why don't I just wildcard in Game Week 6 and use free transfers later instead of my Game Week 13 wildcard, and then I will still have a free hit left over to use somewhere else. Haven't quite figured out where that free hit will go quite yet, but I'm sure there is going to be some opportunities. If there's maybe a random double game week that comes up unexpectedly, it would be really nice to have a free hit in my back pocket. Really nice. So that is kind of in the back of my mind of just holding that free hit and just hoping for a bit of luck. A game gets cancelled through bad weather or something like that and is rescheduled into a double game week. It is possible. It's unlikely, but possible. And having a free hit in the back pocket for an emergency could actually be pretty nice. But that is a story for another time. We've spoken enough about chip strategy today, I think, but wanted to go over that with you guys, what I'm thinking in terms of strategy right now. I think typically I'm quite good with chip strategy stuff, so hopefully what I've said today does make sense, and hopefully you did enjoy this little breakdown rather than just looking at the team, kind of looking at breaking down strategy week by week, because I find it really useful. Of course, if you like the look of this tool, check out the link in the description. You can actually get your team rated for free on Fantasy Football Hub as well, so you can get your percentage number to see how good your team is. But if you enjoyed this video, guys, make sure you do drop a like. Massively helps out. Do subscribe if you're new around here, and feel free to check out another video. Plenty on the channel for Game Week 5, but unless I see you on one of those, I guess I'll see you later, mates. Bye bye.